All right, guys, I'm here today with Dan Mitchen. And Dan, I always like to start off with a compliment. I think Airbnb in general has been a trendy term for 3-4 years, and you've seen a lot of people come in, sneak out. And I would say you've been consistent, at least in the Cleveland market, as a guy who's sticking to it, doubling down. And obviously, we'll talk today about growing the business. But thank you for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I'm going to hit you with a hard ball first, then we can have a nice, friendly conversation. But a few people told me to ask you, if they're paying a cleaning fee, should they be cleaning the house? Why or why not?
If they're paying a cleaning fee, should they be cleaning the house? I always think about it as you're paying the cleaning fee. So think about it this way. If you weren't paying, or how do I want to word this? The cleaning fee is to ensure, like, when you check in as a guest, you know your property is going to be clean, it's going to be ready, you're not going to have any issues. It's not to clean it afterwards. It's more so, hey, I'm paying this fee to ensure that when I check in, I'm going to have clean linens. They're not going to be stained. There's not going to be hair in the shower, things like that, if that makes sense.
All right, you passed the test.
Sweet.
We'll continue.
Sweet.
So, yeah, for people who don't know, how did you kind of get into the world of, let's just say, entrepreneurship? Because you didn't begin with Airbnb, right?
No, I didn't. I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur somehow. I just didn't know how. Even my grandpa, I guess my dad told me this, like, he always told my dad, like, your son's going to be an entrepreneur one day. He's going to own a business. I don't know what that looks like, but he's going to do something. And I've always had, like, weird hobbies, like, we don't have to get into them, but crazy hobbies all the time. I was a private investigator prior to real estate, and I thought that's what I was going to do. I was going to open up my own PI business, and that was going to be my career. Just didn't enjoy it, though.
Were you like Sherlock Holmes, or what do we mean here?
Yeah, so like workers' compensation cases. There's a few other things as well. It sounds really exciting, but
Like some guy's in a wheelchair, and then you see him stand up and go shoot hoops with his buddy type thing? Okay.
Exactly. Or up there like roofing and things like that. But just a very dry, boring job. Again, it sounds sexy, but yeah.
No excitement in it.
Yeah, no excitement. Then you have to do reports, you have to do video editing, and then you have to follow someone around without getting caught, and that's a lot harder than it sounds. So there was that, and then I got into real estate by accident, actually. My wife and I, when we were buying our first home, our first agent, we told him, like, hey, call Dan for everything. A lot of works during the day, so call Dan, but didn't listen. Called my wife all the time, was that used car salesman, wanted to sell us every single house, and just like not a good vibe. So we fired him, found another agent, and then he was completely opposite, like wouldn't return our phone calls, was just kind of like hanging back at the house where we were, touring it ourselves, and just not very knowledgeable. And then our third agent was just like, she was phenomenal, like knocks it out of the park, could tell like she was actually vested in us, wanted to make sure that we were making the right decision. And I was like, if she can do this and these other two guys can do this, why can't I? So on a whim one night, I signed up for my real estate classes, and here I am today.
What year was that?
That would have been 2015.
Okay, so at the time, was being a realtor as trendy as it is today, you think?
No, because I remember when we fired those two agents making a Facebook post like, hey, does anybody know a real estate agent in Cleveland? And I got no recommendations, which is like, that just
Oh, that's not happening today. Yeah, you're going to see 110.
Yeah.
Okay, so as you started in real estate, obviously a lot of people, I've heard this, where they maybe start by getting their license, but as they get in, they see, oh, there's all these other businesses that are happening. So how did it go from, let's say, being like Dan the realtor to, okay, now I'm kind of stepping in and seeing these other ways people make money with real estate?
Yeah, and I tend to get bored with things, and that's kind of what's happened in real estate so far.
Okay.
I would say up to this point. So started as an agent. I was the number one or number two agent out of my office as a single agent, and that led into a leadership position with coaching. So I was a productivity coach. Absolutely loved it. Like, there's just something about helping others build their business, and even to this day, like some of those agents that I coach, seeing them just crush it is awesome. And then I started my family, and that just wasn't sustainable. I was working probably like 60, 70 hours a week with running my business, coaching agents, and I just burnt the bridges on everything, and jumped into apartment syndication, and then got into Airbnbs on the side, and then flipping single family homes. and then stopped all that, and now it's just strictly short-term rentals.
Okay, so when you're going through all of these processes, like what are your indicators, let's say emotionally? So like obviously being a parent is something that's going to determine it, but also like do you love it or not? How did you go through each of these things? Because I think one thing I'm respecting is you tried way more than one thing, but it sounds like you gave them all an honest go. So how in your head do you analyze, okay, I've tried this, I've put my effort in, it's not the right thing to put effort into more?
Yeah, the apartment syndications, that was fun, but also like I just had some challenges, and I didn't love it. Like it was cool thinking about long term, but it wasn't a big passion of mine. Flipping single family homes, I was doing that with my now business partner, Nate, and that was cool, but it wasn't scalable the way we wanted to scale, if that makes sense. So like thinking long term, there's so many unknowns with flipping a house. Like you get in there and you start gutting it, and now you run into foundation issues or plumbing issues. There's just a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
So actually, a house I flipped with somebody else, I approached Nate and I'm like, hey, I've done a couple Airbnbs. This would make a great Airbnb. Let's partner on this together and see how it goes. And we did that, and again, we've been best friends since high school, so it's just kind of clicked and just kind of happened, and yeah.
What's the process of that like in that first Airbnb? Because I mean, obviously, like I'm sure, did you stay in an Airbnb before you had your own?
Yeah, so my first Airbnb was just my wife and I's, and it was a small little one-bedroom cottage. Didn't have any internet, no cell service, just kind of get off the grid. And we just kind of made it an Airbnb. We're like, we'll use it half the time, and we only bought it for like 65, 70,000.
How hard is it to set up an account?
It's not very hard.
Like making a Facebook profile?
Yeah, like making a Facebook profile. Just make sure you fill out everything. But yeah, it's not hard at all.
So what's it like when you see that first booking come through? Are you like, holy cow?
It was nerve-wracking, and even now, like sometimes when we first launch a listing, I think we're at 80 listings now, but still even now, like you kind of have the butterflies, like I hope everything goes okay, and we just let our guests know, like, hey, you're our first guest, like that's why you're getting a 20 or 25% off discount.
Yeah.
Like give us feedback, let us know if there's anything wrong, and we'll do our best to make it right.
And
so
you
still get those butterflies.
Yeah, do you feel like that creates lifelong fans of that property where it's like if they're the first one and they love it, it's like, oh man, we were the first ones here?
Yeah, I don't know about lifelong fans with ours in particular, just because like Cleveland isn't necessarily a vacation spot.
Yeah, it's not as
more
destination-y,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So it's like we're coming here for a graduation party or whatever it may
Family
be.
or maybe
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, but we have had people where they'll respond back like, you never really know what kind of guest you're gonna get, but there are some like playful ones, and that's the kind of guests that we like, where they're like, oh man, like we're kind of nervous, we're the first guest, but yeah, we'll absolutely give you honest feedback, and we can appreciate that.
Yeah, do you often find that like the nerve of who did I let book this happen a lot, or do you think there are systems you've put in place that mitigate that at this point?
No, we definitely have our moments, and I will say, like with our non-vacation style properties, those are what I stress out about the most, and we don't allow locals unless it's like a legitimate reason, like, hey, our house flooded or our house caught on fire, whatever it may be. Or if they, sometimes they'll say like, we have family members that live 2 houses down, and we just want to use your place during the holidays for them to
Yeah,
stay
to be
at.
close.
Yeah, but if we start to get issues where it's a local, and they're like, the first question we ask them is, hey, hello, what brings you to the area? And they'll say visiting or chilling or, some like very vague response. That's where you start to get nervous. And I tell our team too, like, if you have butterflies, let's just cancel them and,
It's not worth the risk.
move on. Yeah. If they're local. If they're local and there's the red flags, let's not stress it and cancel them.
I think the funniest I ever saw was an investor we both know had a property in Euclid, and I remember he showed me, he was like, hey man, I got this booking. The account is like 6 days old. The name is Benjamin,
No.
and it says 2 guests. And so he was close enough in the area because he had another property. And I remember him taking a video. It was like 23 guys walking into this house, whole contracting crew.
Oh man.
So when you have those things happen, like maybe how do you help other Airbnb guests like know the signs beyond like saying, oh, I'm chilling or I'm just vibing at this place for a day?
So you definitely, again, we discourage locals unless it's a legitimate reservation. We also use a software. It's called Superhog. So with every guest that makes a booking, we can go in and search their name, their email address, and phone number. And a lot of these guests that are coming for parties, they'll have like burner phones. If they're throwing a party, they're going to throw a party. And they'll have burner phones, so we can detect that. And if they have a burner phone, it's an automatic no.
Yeah.
And again, they have to give us a reason on why they're staying. And those are honestly the big three.
Because you can find everything out from there, right?
Yeah. If they have a burner phone, they're going to be up to no good. And we've had those situations, and those aren't fun.
I would say like for anyone who might be scared to invest in Airbnb, let's go all the way down that route. Like what are some moments maybe you or your partner have had that were nothing you could have ever planned for and really made you step up and ask like, is this worth doing?
That's a great question. I will say there's never been a moment where we've said, is this worth doing? But one of the craziest or scariest stories, it was for a client, and it was her like first or second guest. And the following day, our cleaner walks in, and there's a gun on the floor. So I tell him like, just leave. We'll figure this out. Like I don't want anyone getting hurt. So she left, parked down the street, and we mentioned to the guests like, hey, you guys are past checkout time. That was another thing. It was past checkout time. So they end up packing up. They left like super late. I don't remember how late, but probably an hour late past their checkout time. And then our cleaner goes in, and there's just blood everywhere. And when I say blood, I mean like an entire roll of paper towels just like soaked in blood, not just like a little cut. And we had to call the police, and the police came, and they were there for a while. And they were telling us like, yeah, there was something that went down last night that we're investigating, and we think this has something to do with it. And that's probably our craziest story. And again, I felt horrible for this client because it was her very first guest. And I had to explain to her, I'm like, this is not normal. But I think a big part of making her feel okay was communication and like just letting her know like, hey, we're on top of this.
Yeah.
And with that though, there was nothing we could do. Like nothing.
And so like, how are you? So this was your client, correct?
Correct.
And so
yeah.
was this your property, their property? Is this shared? How does that work?
It was their property that we managed.
Okay. So how do you then communicate, for example, with the police here? Is this your role or their role?
So we took on, this was a while ago, but I believe we took on everything, and she might have had to get involved.
Yeah.
But from what I remember, we were the one that provided them with the guest details and
Yeah.
all that good stuff.
And so then how do you make sure that person doesn't run again?
Well, thankfully on Airbnb, there's an option where it asks you when you review the guests, would you host this person again?
You got to give a 0 out of 5 for that.
Yeah, and we also reached out to Airbnb, and if I remember correctly, their profile got deleted after that. So, yeah, I don't think they're using Airbnb anymore.
Yeah. Holy moly. That's a wild. So, did you ever find out what happened?
No idea.
They weren't allowed to tell you?
We didn't. Again, this was so long ago. I don't remember us asking, but
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
you can put 2 and 2. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's wild. So then obviously that's like a worst case scenario, right? But now looking at that property to this day, does it still cash flow? Are there still people coming in all the time?
Yeah, we haven't had. Like I said, we're around 80 listings now. We haven't had an issue even close to as crazy as that one.
Yeah.
And that was probably about 2 years ago. But yeah, today it's doing very well. I think it grosses around like mid 50s a year over in University Heights. Is really, really good.
Yeah, so this is something that, I mean, it's a chance for you to talk about home hop, but for anyone out there, like who is the ideal person? Let's say maybe they have a high, day job, high income, or maybe they're an entrepreneur, but they don't necessarily like invest in real estate. They have something else that makes money. What is the easiest entryway into having your own Airbnb?
That's a great question. I would say become familiar with your market. So the one thing is like you want to make sure it's going to cash flow. And a lot of people don't realize like we're blessed to be in Cleveland. Like Cleveland is very untapped from a short-term rental perspective. And I don't want to keep saying Airbnb. Like it's kind of like tissues and Kleenex. Like people just call it
Yeah.
Airbnb. But like short-term rental, we're very blessed to be in Cleveland. And I would say like if you have a nice 3-bedroom home within 15 minutes of downtown, you're gonna gross like mid 50s. And again, don't like go out and just buy an Airbnb like blind, like knowing that. Like do your research, but just act like you're a guest. Go on Airbnb and do your research, and then we often tend to just overthink things. And I would say just go out and do it, and you'll figure it out.
So like, let's look at a financial perspective. We'll use some ballpark numbers here. Let's say a home's 150K and someone has planned in their head, we're going to put, let's say 15 to 20K down for the down payment. What's, let's say not a cheap ass amount, but not going above and beyond of like, this is what you should be ready to pay to furnish this, put some personality in. Like here, we got a lot of art, a lot of, motion. Yeah. What would you kind of say that price range looks like?
It's going to vary. And it depends on if you're doing it or if you're having a professional do it. If you're doing it, you're probably going to be around like 12 to 15. Professionally, probably like anywhere from 15 to maybe slightly north of 20.
Yeah.
Again, how good you want to do it. But don't go cheap on it. Don't do the IKEA stuff. Things are going to break, and you're going to dump all that money right back into the property. So making sure that you don't buy cheap stuff, but also making sure that you have a system and process for when things do break, you can get reimbursed through your guests or through Airbnb, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. Okay. And so on the inverse now, because obviously like Home Hop has a completely different model. Who are the type of people that you're usually seeking out as clients, and what are you doing to help them?
They're mainly real estate investors. So investors that are flipping homes, and now after they renovate, instead of actually selling them, they can do a cash out refinance, pull some cash out depending on how much they have liquid, and then use that money for their furniture, and then get it on board and get it cash flowing, and they can hold it for however long as they want. But I would say real estate investors are who we primarily work with.
Okay, so when we're looking at buy house and go traditional renter, buy house, short-term rental, what are some of the things you usually tell people when they are maybe a little skeptical about the short-term renter?
I think people should be more skeptical about long-term rentals, to be completely honest. When you think about it, like a long-term rental, how often are you as an owner looking at your property and have eyes on it and know what kind of condition your property is in? With short-term rentals, they're getting cleans at least once a week, sometimes 2, 3, even 4 times a week. You constantly have to keep up with your property. So like if you're not, let's say a guest accidentally puts a hole in the wall, or I don't know, an appliance isn't working, like you're going to fix that. Otherwise it's going to show up in the reviews.
Yeah.
Your score is going to go lower, and you're going to show up in less and less results because of your review score and Airbnb's algorithm.
So the idea of it's too much wear and tear, if you're being responsible and you're checking it, isn't true, because there's actually layers of, no, we're keeping this clean, we're keeping this fixed. Whereas like, I'll call myself out at our last apartment. I remember one morning I was running late. I think I flushed the toilet and bumped the comb. And the comb went right down the toilet, and I knew it went down there. And I had to call maintenance, I believe, that afternoon. And he looked at me and he goes, so the comb that went down here, when did you drop that in? And I was like, comb, what are we talking about? But, I genuinely think, and this is just like as a guy who's been a renter, you don't want to fix those things. You kind of have this jaded perspective of, I pay rent here, it should fix itself. But then you're kind of so busy that it's like, am I really going to call for this tiny scratch on the wall? Probably
Exactly.
not. In your head, you're like, oh, add 75 out of my security deposit. But when it's a short-term rental and you're treating it like a business, you're not necessarily thinking about what would that guest tolerate. You always are ready for the new guest, right?
Exactly. Yep. And again, if an Airbnb guest or VRBO or whatever it is, if they're paying top dollar, they want to make sure they're not checking in and the bed frame is broken or there's issues, because again, it's going to show up in your reviews.
Yeah. I want to ask about reviews for a second, because I think one time, this is probably the funniest review I've ever seen. There was an Airbnb we really wanted to go to, and the most recent review was a 1 out of 5 stars. And the guy said the bed was too soft to treat my lady right. And I could not believe that that was in a public review, but I'm sure you've seen some craziness. So, like,
Yeah.
what are some of the reviews you've seen that you could have never expected?
Similar situation. I don't think this guest actually left us a review, but he called us and wanted to cancel, and he was saying, so we have a listing where it's technically 2 bedrooms, but the 1 bedroom is a walkthrough and the wall doesn't go all the way up.
Okay.
So it's maybe goes up like 3/4 of the way, and we have it disclosed, but it's whatever. He didn't read it. It's okay. But I remember him calling me. He's like, "Hey, if I'm gonna be here in Cleveland with my lady for the weekend, I don't want my brother and my sister-in-law in the other room." He's like, I need to cancel. I'm sorry. I'm like, I can respect that. Like, we probably wouldn't let it go now, but yeah, that was probably a crazy one. And then just some people, they don't actually understand Airbnb's review system. Like, anything less than 5 stars, it really hurts you.
Yeah.
So we make sure that we relay too, like, hey, if there's something that's not right, let us know, and we want to fix it. And sometimes no review, actually all the time, no review is better than a 4-star.
I've done 1 4, and I had to talk to you about this. So I always like to give a 5 out of 5, even if I have feedback, because I'm like, I understand this is a business for them, and unless it's like gross negligence, like usually that's something unpredictable. But this was January of this year. We stayed in a place called Valsparrow, Indiana. And we were driving out to Iowa the day that the whole country went like under 0 degrees. And so we get there. I'm like, hey, it's going to be like a 8:30 arrival, just so you know. And this was a, what do they call them, apartment dwelling unit. So it was on the same property. And there was a fence. So I have my dog, girlfriend, and we'd been driving for 6 hours. We have to get up the next morning to drive. Fence frozen shut. She's not answering her phone. It's now going on 9 o'clock. My dog is running around. He can't stand in the snow because it's freezing. So then we get inside the place. I look in the kitchen, and the area where people are holding their glasses and like silverware is a giant 2x4 tilted like this, where if like I jump the wrong way, the kitchen's falling apart.
Oh no.
And so the whole time, we're like, this is just a place to stay. I'm going to sleep through the night. We'll get up in the morning. We get up in the morning. Hot water doesn't work in the shower. And I'm like really just trying to be like, be positive, be positive. And I don't know how it worked in the system, but apparently I had to pay the dog deposit separately, which I didn't know. Maybe that's a feature. And I had 6 phone calls from the host before 10 a.m. that I hadn't paid the dog deposit yet.
Oh my gosh.
And so she was the first one I had hit with the 4 out of 5. And it was more for the hosting. Like, I get, if they don't have a lot of money for the property, the kitchens, I can live with that. But yeah, like how do you handle communication style when you're dealing with these people to where you're not overbearing, but you're still there as a resource?
It's all systems and processes, and we honestly probably over communicate with our guests. But anytime that we get a repeating question, like what's the Wi-Fi, what's the Wi-Fi, or where's the TV remote, or how do you work the TV, we create a system and a process for it to where it's in our check-in instructions or check-in welcome message. But now, I never do any of the guest messaging. Half of our team doesn't. We have people dedicated on our team where that's all they do is they do guest messaging and other like small like various tasks.
Yeah.
And I say small, but they're still important.
Yeah.
But they handle all that for us. If they have a question, we use Slack.
Yep.
So if they have a question, they put it in Slack under the whichever property channel that listing's for. And then one of our cleaners, our head designer, head of cleaning, someone will answer it, general manager, and the guest gets their answer. But even if, and I teach our people too, like, if you don't know the answer, just let the guest know, like, hey, we see your question. We don't know the answer right now. We're working on it. We'll get back to you within 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And just kind of set the tone, like, we see you, we hear you, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm always curious, like, whenever I hear that, because it's something I had to work on a lot in my company. Like, who's the nerd behind the scenes that pushes systems with you guys?
That would be my business partner, Nate.
Okay.
So he, again, we kind of just like lined up just kind of worked out. He was with a company out in the Bay, a startup company, and worked very closely with their CEO. They're going to be valued nicely. I have no idea what that looks like today. But they're a startup AI company doing very, very well. So he got to learn like systems and processes firsthand. and then it all kind of translated over to Home Hop and how we build everything. So like Slack, our tech stack, the whole 9 yards, it just worked very, very well. And even like the corporate setting in general, like how important it is to have weekly meetings with your team, one-on-one team meetings. And I didn't come from that. Like being a real estate agent, like I could do team meetings or like trainings, but I never did like the corporate setting meetings, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember like 2 weeks ago, we were running a team call. Katie was running it. We had our editors on there. We had our creative directors and even like some of our vendors that we work with, like our paid ads guy. And I just remember it was like the first time since high school I was bored out of my freaking mind. But then I actually thought about it. I was like, this is probably a good thing. Like if I'm bored out of my mind, we're probably doing the things that are slow enough that are important. But like, I'm assuming, who's kind of the visionary in your company? Is that you?
It's probably both Nate and myself. We're always thinking ahead, and we started that when we first started. We're like, let's grow this to where we can sell our business 10, 15 years from now and really have some sort of wealth. So like everything that we do is a system and process. So like we have a separate Airbnb account for Nate and I, and our separate business when we first started, our 9 properties. We have a separate Airbnb account for our real estate fund, for our property management company. So that way, when we go to sell, everything is separate and just very, very clean. And we realized too, like, if Nate and I are involved with every single thing, we're not going to be able to sell. So it's still working on the business, but what can we leverage out? What can we create a system and process for? So you can come in 15 years from now, buy something, and everything is very just not black and white.
It's not, it doesn't need to be Dan.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and this is something that I remember going to a few conferences. It was kind of like this sad realization, but it excited me because when they explained my business model, they're like, you have one of the least sellable business models on the planet because it's going to be high cash flow if you keep growing it correctly. But a lot of it's based around you and your brain and your strategy. Yeah. They're like, but that's not to say this can't lead to other opportunities. So how did you, going from like real estate, personal brand, I'm only working with Dan because it's Dan, accept that, hey, a lot of this isn't going to be about me. It's going to be about a company and a system. Did you kind of look at it as like, we're building this entity, or how did you wrap your head around it not being such a personalized business?
Honestly, I love being a team player, like as cheesy as that may sound. Like I love seeing people on our team win. And that's like, honestly, that's more important to me than when we sell our business 8 to 10 years from now. Like there's been 2 people in our company the last month that have reached out to Nate and I, and they're like, this is the most money. The one said, this is the most money I've ever had in my bank account. I truly enjoy working with you guys. That was awesome. There's another guy where he's like, I just had an X dollar month. Like, this has never happened to me before. This is awesome. There's someone else we were able to help out financially when they got into trouble, and just seeing the appreciation on their face, like I love that. Like that's what I absolutely love. Like more than like having my personal paydays, like I love seeing our team win. And then another one, they just bought their own short-term rental. So they bought their own short-term rental, and our company's going to help manage it. And
it's like watching your kid go to college, right?
It is. Jeez. It is. Like I love seeing our team win.
Yeah. And do you think that also kind of, because I've noticed this as well too, because I freelanced for the first 2 years, luckily had a girlfriend to invite in, which was way more emotionally easy than hiring externally. But yeah, like I remember, so one guy who's been with us for about a year now, he's 22. He started as like a part-time editor. Then I kind of gave him some, let's call it like virtual assistant work, just because I knew he wanted more hours. He got his first apartment. So his goal when he met me was, I want my own apartment 1 year from today. I think it was a year and 2 months. But yeah, the other night it was crazy because he finally got his first apartment. And I was like, screw this strategy call, dude. Like, just go enjoy your place. Like, go get some food. That's awesome. But what I noticed, like selfishly, is when I feel like the team is having these wins, there's kind of like this wind at my back, and then I can have a dog shit day, but instead of me like sulking in it or sitting there, I'm like, man, everyone else is hyped. Like I need to just kind of let that slide and keep the momentum.
Dude, 100%. Yeah, we always talk about like team camaraderie too. Like we don't want drama. Like we treat it as like, you call it our second family, like our home hop family. And that's the way it feels a lot of times. And again, all four of the team wins.
Yeah, and I think externally too. So like that's your internal team, and I think for a lot of people out there, they don't really know who they might be investing with. They might get a nice little PDF made in Canva, but you mentioned a fund. So I saw this thing on, what was it? Maybe Wall Street Journal the other day that in 2025, the S&P return is expected to drop to 3%, which is way too low if you're investing in that. So for someone who might want to get involved in your fund, what does the capital allocation look like? And then obviously I know you can't make promises, but what are maybe some of the positive returns you've seen for past clients?
We can do a case study. So our fund's actually closed now, but we raised $2 million. Each share was $50,000. With that, it was 8%, an 8% preferred return, and then profit share as well. So depending on how many shares they bought, they get a piece of the pie. And then we have their limited partners, and then me, my partner Nate, and then we have another partner, Vince. We're all the GPs, the general partners. With that, I would say it depends on how you're looking at your investment. Let's say we do another fund in the future and do the same exact thing. And it also depends on where interest rates are, what housing prices are doing, where you're buying. But I would say like $250,000 house at 7.5%. If you hold it for say 10 years, probably a 20% return if you factor in appreciation. And I wouldn't say like don't go out and invest and bank on appreciation, but when you're buying and you're going to hold something for the longer midterm, look at house prices 10 years ago, like just went up.
They're going to keep going up.
Yeah, exactly. So when you factor that in, should be around 20%, and we're not there yet. Obviously, this is our first year.
Yeah.
But
And how many of these investors do you think, making an investment into short-term rentals for the first time? Like, did you notice a lot of those conversations? It's like, not only are they trusting us with their money, but this is a new model that probably 30 years ago, this wasn't a thing, for sure.
I think all of them. And a lot of like our partners on this fund were friends and family members. And it's more so like proof of concept for us. Like, hey, we want to show everybody that we can raise a fund. We're good operators, and we're gonna overpromise on what we're doing here, and then we're gonna have some other things coming up that are gonna be much bigger. So, and I say proof of concept. Proof of concept, I guess, was when Nate and I first got started with our 9 properties. Then we launched our management company, and then we said, hey, we know how to do everything. We have the systems, the processes. Let's launch a fund.
Yeah.
So only leading to bigger funds.
Yeah. So one of the things I obviously like to talk about on here, before we wrap up, is what are people figuring it out? So it's why I named the show this. A lot of people might look at you and go, man, that guy's doing everything he wants to do. They have a fund. They have all these properties. Like, he's got it figured out. But what is something that you personally, as Dan, are, let's say, either struggling with or really in a process of not knowing what to do right now in your business?
I would say, well, if you would ask me this question a week ago, I would say, how do we value our business? Like, so we had, and I guess that's still the question. So we have a property management company, and we have real estate involved with it too. If it was just a management company, it'd be a little bit different. There's multiples, but I learned like certain multiples. Again, this is more so my business partners, Nate's, Allie. But I would say, how do we truly value our business? Just because there's real estate involved. As far as like figuring it out, how do we use AI more? I would say we're using AI a ton, and I know we talked about this before the podcast. Like, AI can now look at each of our listings and knows everything about that listing. We can create videos that transcribe our walkthrough video, so now it knows even more. But how can we use AI more? Where's AI going? How can we best leverage AI as AI continues to evolve into the short-term rental industry?
Yeah, the transcription data is huge. And for anyone watching this right now, we're ending October 24, going into November. You need transcription data. I've taken 2 pretty expensive classes on how to use AI, and the biggest takeaway for me personally was our strategy calls we do every month. I have Zoom recorded. They were like, that is the gold in your business. We heard, I think it was in 2017, that data is worth more than oil. And everyone was kind of like, why? And no one knew. But as we get to this point today, you as Dan, if you do this correctly, and I'm sure AI team has told you this, if you get enough data in there first, even if someone tries to mimic a home hop in 4 years, they're not just competing with the business model, service, and properties. They're competing with the data you've collected on everything about the experience.
Data is so important. We one other nugget here. We started using these Wi-Fi routers that we put in each property. So instead of just giving our guests a Wi-Fi name and password, in order for them to use the Wi-Fi they have to opt in, but it's automatically opt in, so they have to opt out. In order for them to use the Wi-Fi, they have to give us their name, their email address, and their phone number. And then from there, they go into a campaign, and now we can touch them several times.
You're pulling the Starbucks on them.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, data is very, very valuable. And then when we can use that data and get them to book directly with us next time instead of an OTA platform, now we cut out the middleman, and the guest pays less, and we make a little bit more.
Yeah, which is very cool. And, you brought up another idea, so I got to ask you this question.
Yeah.
I run a business. We're shooting a podcast. We upload files for tons of people every day. Am I out of line to give a guest a 4 out of 5 if they lie to me about their Wi-Fi speed?
4 out of 5 might be a little tough. But I would say if they're blatantly lying, then maybe.
Like if they send me a screenshot and then I get there and it's like a third of the speed.
Yeah, I mean, I would be upset. Maybe ask for a refund first.
Yeah, come over and post these for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I know a lot of business owners. We rent for different reasons, and I'm curious for you. Like, not all of these are vacation rentals, correct?
Yeah, most of ours are not vacation rentals.
Okay, so everyone, when they think of short-term rentals online or on Instagram, it's always this like sexy, tiny little bungalow on the beach, and it cash flows $6 million a month. But for you, like, how do you look at a market like Cleveland and actually look at data to be like, yeah, this home near the airport is going to get people to rent it from us?
Yeah, now we just kind of know, and we know, like 4 bedrooms. Like if you can buy a 4-bedroom. That's great. If you can buy a house that has 4 bedrooms and at least 3 full baths, that's fantastic. If you find, like we have a client that has a 5-bedroom home in Port Clinton, and that thing just like crushes during the summertime, like does very, very well. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But then you get into like, I would say stay away from your 1 bedrooms, your 2 bedrooms, even 3 bedrooms. Like if we're buying a 3-bedroom, it needs to have at least 2 full baths, and if we get a finished basement, that's great.
Yeah.
Not always the case in Cleveland, but it's definitely doable. But we just kind of know our market now.
Yeah. And another thing I want to ask, I work with a lot of real estate investors that are traditionally renovating a home, and maybe they're flipping it residentially to a home buyer. And I know others that have a kind of similar but different business model to yours, where they're going to flip the home to an out-of-state investor and manage it themselves. What is something that you wish, let's say, more Northeast Ohio investors knew they could do to maybe change how they're renovating these homes to maybe set themselves up to be a client for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, it goes back to the renovation. There's different grades of renovation. There's like if you're a buy and hold investor, there's rental grade, and then there's, you call it short-term rental grade. Regular rental grade, like you can do the Formica countertops, granite remnants, whatever that may be, your standard shaker white cabinets, that's okay. When you're doing a short-term rental, you need the property to have a little bit more pop. So you need to spend the money on the quartz countertop, the nice backsplash, the finished basement, the whole 9 yards, and your property is going to do so much better performance-wise compared to your competition, and it's going to last longer. So again, when you're doing the quartz countertops versus Formica, it's going to last longer.
Yeah. And so do you think enough people in this market that, let's say, are active flippers even think about Airbnb as an option, or do you think mentally people are still a little blind to the opportunity?
I think we're getting there, but I would still say the majority of investors that fix and flip are blind to it. And maybe you just don't know until you dive in and get into it. But again, that's what we're here for. And we love, like, if you're flipping a property, like have our team come through and we'll tell you what you need to do, what you don't do. We have a head interior designer on staff where she can come in and give you recommendations. You don't have to, but it's there as an option.
Yeah.
But yeah, really just making sure that your property pops is it's gonna peak performance.
Dang. Yeah. So what are you excited about as you look into the future? Obviously, I asked you what you're figuring it out at the moment, but as you look forward to the future, what are things that if you watch this podcast in 5 years from now, you'll be like, I'm proud I did that?
It kind of goes back to earlier, like our team winning. Like I want to be able to pay our team a lot of money, and maybe that's not even money. Some of them it's just like, hey, with money I get experiences, but also like doing cool things with your team. Like we did axe throwing with our cleaning team a couple months ago, and that was fun.
It's hard.
Yeah,
I did that for the first time last weekend. 0 for 5 right out the gate, and I was like, well, I'm trying again.
Yeah, you look at it and it's like, okay, this can't be that hard, and then like there's an entire
wood on
technique to
wood.
it.
Yeah, and it hurts.
So that's fun, and I guess being more selfishly, like it's really cool building this with my best friend, who's also my business partner, and being able to build something that we can both sell one day. That's going to be a lot of fun. But then also, like, how do I get to pass this down to my kids? And not saying like I just want to give them all this money, but figuring out a way like that'll be the next step. Like, how can I strategize this to where they don't ever have to worry about money? Like, I want them to work for it.
Yeah.
And know like the dedication, consistency. That's a big thing that goes into everything. But being able to pass something down to them someday too.
Yeah. Dang. Yeah, there's a lot there. I've always wondered how it is to be working with a very close friend. Have you guys had moments where you're...
Dude, honestly, like we haven't had a big blow up because we can set our emotions aside most of the time, and we know each other so well. Like I can tell if he's on his last nerve, he can tell if I'm on my last nerve, and we just kind of let each other be.
Yeah.
Sometimes we might poke a little too hard.
Yeah.
But we haven't had like a big blow up argument. I can be honest and transparent with him.
Yeah.
And that's what we tell our entire team. Like we want transparency. But I can tell him like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And he had to have that conversation with me a month ago. Perfect example. So again, we have our Slack channel, and I'm just like so go with our fund. I do our revenue management. I do meetings with our team. I implement a lot of the systems and processes. And he kind of called me out. He's like, hey, you're not being active enough in Slack. And
Katie's going to call mine with Discord team. I'll be better next week. But it's hard because you have to balance it, right? Where Katie's obviously, she's talking to the team every day. She's very integrated with them. Whereas me, I'm very much taking care of the client. Like I'm just, how's our strategy? Are the videos looking good? And there's definitely a participation level that it can sneak away from you, because when you see them winning, like you said, you're happy for them, you're proud, but they're like, man, I haven't heard from Dan in 2 weeks.
Exactly. And he called me out, and at first, like, I wrote up this long text, and I was like all pissed off, and then I stopped, and I'm like, you know what? He's right. Like,
and also, when do people rationally send a wall of text?
Not
often.
So, and I told him, I was like, I had this long text. I'm not gonna lie, what you said kind of pissed me off a little bit, but you're right. And we called each other, we talked it out, and I told him like, hey, I'll get better, and then it just got better. And it's that balance of life. Like, you're never going to be 100% perfect at everything. Like, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a business owner, I'm a friend, I'm into running, like health and fitness. And it's like, you can focus on one thing, but there's going to be something else that lacks. So just trying to keep the circle as circular as you can, but knowing it's never going to be a perfect circle.
Yeah. I was curious, how has your health journey been? That's something I've noticed from your social media from afar. You seem to be putting a lot of effort into it.
It's dude, it's been awesome. I was facing some demons and just not being the person I wanted to be in, like, I would say 2022, 2023. And the end of 2023, I'm like, I got to change. So beginning of this year, I slowly just started making changes, and that led to running. And actually, this Sunday will be my first half marathon, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Are you going to be sore, or are you going to just do it with ease?
No, I'll probably be a little bit sore. I'm not too worried about it.
You run consistently, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not just like going in cold turkey.
I've never ran 13 miles, but I've ran 10 miles, and I feel like the adrenaline can get me there.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about finishing. It's more for me about like seeing the consistent effort I put in to like the changes I've made over the last year, like going to bed on time, eating right,
Yeah.
logging 20 to 30 miles of running per week. I've never done all this in my entire life. And now Sunday, all this preparation leads to that. And I'm excited just to hit that finish line.
How much have you as a, like selfishly as a business owner, raised your own stats just by working on your health outside of business?
Oh, it's night and day. Again, just the mental clarity. And it's not just running, it's like taking care of yourself. So like doing the green smoothies in the morning, your minerals, taking your magnesium, vitamin.
Vitamin D.
Yeah, vitamin D and K2, taking all of that and just like feeling better in the morning. And instead, like the old me would stay up until like midnight or 1 o'clock, just eating like shit, watching like YouTube and just like,
Brain rot.
yeah. But my excuse was like, oh, I've just grinded all day. I need to turn my brain off now. And that's what I would do. And then I would just wake up in the morning, like just feeling like shit. Like, what am I doing? And then just like in that constant cycle. And then finally I woke up one day, I'm like, enough is enough. We gotta figure this out.
What was the turning point?
Self-realization of realizing I had so much potential and I was selling myself short. And I don't want to be on my deathbed one day thinking about everything I had left in the tank and things I didn't accomplish. I want to be on my deathbed thinking like, I gave it everything I had. I did this. So I did a half marathon in 2024. 2025, I did a full marathon. 2026, I did a full Ironman. Whatever that looks like, I don't want to have anything left in the tank when I'm on my deathbed.
And so if someone out there is watching and they related to what you just said, like they were up till 2 a.m. last night watching YouTube, relaxing, and you know they're eating like shit, and they just know that they're in this cycle. Like, what would you say to Dan 2 years ago to get him out?
One step at a time. And this is a Joe Rogan thing, but look at your life on the outside looking in, like you're the producer of your own movie and you are the main character. So what are you going to do? Like, what does your story look like? So what I did is I went into my calendar and I started scheduling the first of every month. Like this month, these are the changes we're making. So coming up on 1 year, I'll be vape free. So I smoked, I vaped since I was 18, and 1 year coming up. I think actually next week. I have it in my calendar. But that was the first chapter. Is I got to quit this. Next chapter was we're gonna walk at least one time a week, like just super small. But that momentum leads to bigger and better things. So I started walking once per week. Then that led to walking 3 times per week. And then like, oh, I can walk a half hour a day. And then that led to running. And, oh, I can run an entire time around my block without stopping. And then, oh, running doesn't have to be bad. Like I can go at a slow pace and actually enjoy it. And it's that mental clarity, like put my headphones in and like just kind of vibing. So I would say start with small habits that are sustainable and then be consistent with it. And when I say be consistent with it, like be consistent with it.
Yeah.
And you can have like your passwords can revolve around this. Like even my phone background, like I'm going to have a bunch of notifications, but like a little progress every day leads up to big results. Like that's been on my phone background for the last year or so. My passwords revolve around my goals. Like,
so you're putting little like droplets of be consistent with yourself.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have times where you fall off, but it's how fast can I hop back on?
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of people, it's just natural. You go through your funks and just know it's going to happen. But then right after that funk, let's come back stronger and better.
And you'll be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, this is all exciting. And I'm sure we'll have another conversation about it. But I do want to give you a chance. So for everyone watching, it's going to be a lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs, or maybe just some people who are family and friends of mine that, you know, they do have a little capital, they do have a little equity or a second property. How can people get in contact with you to learn more about Home Hop, but also just to connect with Dan?
Yeah. You can hit me up on Facebook. My dad also has the same name, so make sure you just look at the bio.
This Dan.
The younger, I'm the bald one. Facebook, Instagram. Call me, text me, 330-322-8868. those are probably the easiest channels.
Sweet, dude. Thank you for coming on.
Appreciate you having me.